So there's a certain holiday that a lot of people debate on what the name of it should be called. This holiday is on the second Monday of September. The holiday I'm talking about is Columbus Day, or as it should be called, Indigenous Peoples Day. Most recently, a lot of Native Americans, including myself, have been protesting Columbus Day to change it to Indigenous Peoples Day. So many people on the right and a lot of racist people protest against changing the name to Indigenous Peoples Day because they claim that it's trying to get rid of Western culture and that we're just trying to be too PC. A video that came out about 6 months ago by none other than online Ivy League school PragerU titled Goodbye Columbus Day talks about how the holiday doesn't actually celebrate a homage to its original inhabitants and that it's leftist propaganda to try to destroy and get rid of Western culture and Western civilization.
Thanksgiving, Independence Day, Memorial Day. Holidays are a great time to riddle Americans with needless oppressive guilt. But the one that stands head and shoulders above the rest is Columbus Day. The day where progressives indoctrinate your children into believing Columbus to be Satan incarnate, the USA to be his evil spawn, and the Native Americans to be pacifists. And so now we have Indigenous Peoples Day.
So Crowder says that progressives try to indoctrinate modern day children with the fact that Columbus was evil, and obviously it doesn't seem like Crowder doesn't think he's so evil. But you have to realize Columbus raped and had little girls raped by his crewmates. Columbus also had the ears cut off of Native Americans, the Taino and the Carib people when they wouldn't listen, and he kidnapped over 1,000 of Taino and Carib people. And then after, Crowder says that kids are also indoctrinated to believe that the US is an evil spawn. Well, considering all the genocide, slavery, and terror that the US has carried out against other countries and other people groups, I would say evil spawn is an understatement. He says that we're made to believe that natives were pacifists. No one ever said natives were pacifists. If anything, natives were taught in our history books to be savages. He's just using that part right there to try to make up a lie how natives were savages and to fabricate lies on how they were barbaric and evil.
Feeling the urge to self-inflict grievous bodily harm yet? That's only natural because the whole charade has become an exercise in hating Western civilization, which is really just an exercise in hating yourself.
So that's an obvious straw man, typical straw man. Indigenous Peoples Day isn't a tactic to try to make people hate Western civilization and Western culture. It's a day that just pays homage to the indigenous people of this country. You're just making up a whole straw man for your argument and what Indigenous Peoples Day is.
First, as far as Columbus goes, the guy deserves some credit, right? Flawed, to be sure, but he was the greatest navigator of his age, the first person to cross the Atlantic from the continent of Europe, and he did so without any maps and only 3 small ships. If you can name them, by the way, comment below, as I'm sure your professor can't.
I mean, Leif Erikson came to Greenland before it was discovered, and he named it Vinland. The only difference between Columbus and Leif Erikson is that Leif Erikson didn't go on a maniac, genocidal, raping rampage. And obviously professors are gonna know what the 3 ships are called. I mean, they're professors.
But your professor probably has taught you the tale of Columbus as a villain, usually as a starting off point to indict the United States as a whole, often relying on a few key myths and some pivotal lies by omission. So, to start with, I'll bet that you probably believe Columbus and other European settlers to simply have committed mass genocide against Native Americans, indigenous. But here's the truth. While there were many examples of brutal warfare between Europeans and Native Americans, neither side actually committed genocide. In fact, there was never an outright policy of Indian extermination.
All right, so let's see what myths and lies Crowder thinks we're being taught about Columbus. Crowder's first example of a lie that we believe is that Columbus and Euro settlers committed mass genocide against the natives and that there was never an outright policy of Indian extermination. So before anything, I want us to look at the original definition of what genocide is. Genos is the Latin word for race, and then cide is the Latin suffix for killer. And the person who made the original definition of genocide is Raphael Lemkin. And in Raphael Lemkin's definition of genocide, he says, genocide is the destruction of an ethnic group. Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when accomplished by mass killings of all members of a nation. It is intended to rather signify a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objectives of such a plan would be disintegration of the political and social institutions of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives of the individuals belonging to such groups. So basically, a quick summary of that is genocide isn't necessarily the deliberate killing of a group. It can also be the destruction of their way of life, which could be language, culture, economic status, other ways like that, manipulating the political and social structures. And it's also the intention, so it doesn't necessarily have to happen for it to not be genocide. So now that we have the definition of what genocide is, let's look at examples of genocide against my ancestors. During the Guatemalan Civil War, the armed forces carried out 3 genocidal campaigns. One of the first was scorched earth policy, and if you guys don't know what that is, it's a military strategy that is used to destroy the resources of the opposer. The food sources, water, and other supply of the Mayans, which were the ethnic group, the indigenous group at the time, and still is, were destroyed intentionally. As you can see, this is a destruction of personal health, as we could see in the original definition. Genocidal rape was also a tactic that was used. That is a disintegration of personal liberty and obviously dignity. Babies and children were slammed to death against the walls or thrown alive into graves where the weight of an adult would crush them to death, thrown, above them. There's honestly no explanation for what kind of genocide is that. I don't need to explain which stage that's on. Even in Canada, where Crowder's from, they had the residential schools back in, I want to say, the 60s, 50s, and 40s, where young Native kids were taken from their tribes and taken from their homes, and they were removed because the settlers didn't want the kids to be influenced by their Native culture. And so that's a clear example of disintegration of culture, dignity, personal liberty, and language, and also religion. And then you have the sterilization of Native American women in the U.S., where 25% of Native American women from the age of 15 to 45 were sterilized. And the birth rate for Native American women in the 70s was at 3.7 and then dropped to 1.8. And that's a clear example of disintegration of the foundation of life, which is birth. And then one more example, you have settlers giving smallpox blankets to Native Americans that were recently held by patients that were sick. And you have a quote by Sir Jeffrey Amherst saying, "You will do well to try to inoculate the Indians with smallpox by means of blankets, as well as to try every other method that can serve to eliminate the race." Now there's a lot of debate on whether this action was actually carried out. But let's remember that in the definition of genocide, it clearly states that genocide is even something to aim in a plan to try and destroy a group or destroy their culture. So that was clear intention, no matter if it happened or if it didn't happen. There are honestly more horrible examples of indigenous peoples in this whole continent that I could go through, but it would probably take up to a day or could probably even take up to a week. But Crowder's claim that there was never a policy of Indian extermination is a total myth. There is clear proof with the definition of genocide that there were policies of Indian extermination and that there was genocide against Native Americans.
Native Americans were mostly wiped out through infectious diseases that the settlers had inadvertently brought with them. Of the estimated 250,000 natives in Hispaniola, Columbus's first stop in the Americas in 1492, new infectious diseases wiped out a staggering 95% of their population by 1517.
Citations for that claim? I mean, you literally just showed your own graph. That was your only citation. I could literally make a graph of whatever I want, and that's not going to be a credible source. A lot of the Caribs and Tainos actually committed mass suicide, and a lot of them were kidnapped and sent as slaves to Spain. So you're obviously trying to take out some certain key points on why the Caribs and why the Taino people were extinct.
You can look at any historical account of even the most one-sided battles and find that they were still just that. Battles! Take Wounded Knee, although hundreds of years later I only bring it up because I know that if I don't, you will. It's become ubiquitous with the idea of Native American genocide. After all, there were 150 to 350 Aboriginals killed or wounded. That's terrible. But there were also 25 American soldiers killed and 39 wounded. That's not genocide. That's a one-sided beatdown with Old Glory wielding the hammer.
Oh my gosh, yo. Alright, so Crowder just left out mad shit and mad background and mad history about what Wounded Knee actually was. So Crowder's trying to claim that the Wounded Knee battle was a two-sided battle, and that's not true whatsoever. To understand what the Wounded Knee Massacre was, we're going to have to look at the background of what Wounded Knee is, and we're going to have to look at the background and sort of context of something called ghost dances. Now, the ghost dances were ritual dances that the natives performed in hopes that the world would be free of the white man, and that the natives could return to the lands, and that the buffalo could roam the Great Plains and the prairies and all that. So the creator of this dance was a Paiute man, medicine man named Wovoka, and the dance had to spread to tribes in the west and the south. Wovoka preached pacifism, yet the whites feared that it would turn violent and that the dance would be revolution against the white people. So the dance would eventually reach the Lakota Sioux. Residents of the South Dakota area demanded that the Sioux would end the ritual. So 300 Sioux left the reservation fearing for their lives, and when the army and the Sioux came in contact with each other, the Sioux reluctantly agreed to be transported to the Wounded Knee Creek at a certain reservation. Then, in the morning of December 29th, 1890, the U.S. Army demanded the surrender of all Sioux weapons. A shot rang out, most likely from miscommunication, and a lot of stuff was going on. And then the 7th Cavalry opened fire on the Sioux. Almost 300 men, including women and children, died. Some died from also freezing in the snow. So when you don't put context into it, it sounds like it was just a battle. But when you actually do research and you don't make a straw man about it, you can see that it was clear genocide and clear massacre.
Natives often gave as good as they got. Not exactly the way genocide usually tends to work.
Just because an ethnic group fights back against its genocidal oppressors doesn't mean genocide cancels out. It's still genocide.
Here's another thing I bet you've been made to believe. That many Native Americans, American Indians, I don't know what, take your pick, lived in harmony with the environment until Columbus arrived and European settlers destroyed the land with their evil technology. Truth, not only did the natives brutally take out people, but they took out entire forests and hunted species to extinction. Squatting Bear and his First Nation buddies weren't hopping into kayaks to block whaling ships, probably because they were too busy killing seals to waterproof their kayaks.
So this right here is another tactic that racists often use to justify the genocide against Native Americans. I mean, this is propaganda that settlers use to justify the genocide and the killings of Native people. So Crowder claims that you probably believe that, oh, all natives lived in harmony. No one's ever said that before. No people group, no religion, no group or no country in this world has ever lived in complete harmony with one another. And Crowder's talking a lot about indigenous people, but he clearly doesn't want to mention the European religions of war that lasted 3 centuries, that killed over 17 million people. Or he doesn't even want to mention the fact of World War I, also known as the Great War, that killed over 4 million people. He's clearly being biased here. Natives also didn't take out forests because there were some clueless savages. They did it to better themselves and to better the ecology in which they lived in. They burnt out old undergrowth to expand the prairie and expand game for hunting. They also facilitated agriculture so that they could build up mineral-rich ash and biomass. This also increased nut production, animals reproducing so they could have better game. This also increased medicine and food and shelter for themselves. So they weren't some savages running around burning forests. They used these tactics and these things to better their own way of life. And then Crowder says something about they literally killed animals to extinction. I mean, Crowder must really hate giving facts because there's no big record of that. I mean, a reason why the buffalo almost got extinct is because a colonel back in the day literally said, kill every buffalo. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone.
First Nation something or other culture was a beautiful, pantheistic one of peace. The truth is, not so much. When Columbus arrived, the islands were inhabited by 2 main tribes. The Arawaks, who were passive and friendly, and the Caribs, who were vicious cannibals. The Arawaks actually lived in fear of the Caribs for, you guessed it, the reasons being that they hunted them down to enslave them and eat them. Yes, eat them. Ironically, we get the name Caribbean Islands from those famous people eaters.
This video is full of so much strawmans and so much historical inaccuracy. Like, it's been debunked that the Caribs were cannibals. There's no record and there's no sort of citation for the Caribs of being cannibals. I mean, there's no record showing that.
You think Cortez was able to command and conquer with only 500 or so conquistadors? Of course not. It took 50,000 screaming, angry allied natives who'd had it up to here with being tortured, enslaved, and forced to carry gold for the other native Aztecs. At some point, they decided to roll the dice and go with the guys sporting funny beards and metal hats.
And Crowder is talking about how Aztecs had slaves and carried out genocide. There was never any records of the Aztecs having slaves, or never any records of the Aztecs having genocidal actions against other groups. But hey, you know what people did have slaves? You know what group of people did carry out genocide? The white European settlers. Hernán Cortés wasn't even a good person. He literally manipulated the political and the social structure and relationship between the Tlaxcalan people and the Aztec people so that they could wage war with each other, because Hernán Cortés was crazy for gold. That's all he really cared about, was gold. Hernán Cortés also had slaves. He was a literal tyrant.
None of this is to say that the early settlers were perfect, or that they didn't carry out their fair share of pretty scummy stuff, but to use America's mistakes as the brush with which to paint the entirety of its history while completely ignoring the indigenous lifestyle of barbarism and borderline evil is inaccurate at best, dishonest at worst. There were plenty of bloody, horrendous battles between the Europeans and the Indians. When a Neolithic tribe encounters a more technologically advanced people, the guys with the boom-boom sticks usually win. Columbus is not the issue here, and never was. This whole Indigenous Peoples Day charade is about teaching your children to despise Western civilization and anybody who dare defend it. But, and again, that could just be my Western civ privilege talking. Happy Columbus Day.
You know what's inaccurate at best and dishonest at worst? This whole video, bro. And I like how he just sweeps that little spice of racism in there, calling the indigenous cultures barbaric and evil. But at the same time, he's saying, oh, we're not saying the colonizers were perfect. They did some bad things. You want to talk about how the native people stabbed pregnant women in the stomach? Did I say native people? Oh, my bad, bro. I meant the Europeans. He's talking about the Europeans like they made these small mistakes, and then he's talking about the indigenous people like their genocide was justified, and that there wasn't no genocide either way. This is clear manipulation, and this is clear propaganda against native people. I mean, nowhere in the video is there any credible sources. Nowhere in the video is there any citations for all these facts. It's extremely historically inaccurate, and it's extremely propagandic. And touching back where he talked about how the natives were barbaric and evil, one of the stages of the pyramid of hate, the top one's genocide, one of the bottom one is prejudice attitudes. And prejudice attitudes includes things like name calling and things like that. And he's literally contributing to a pyramid of hate right now by calling the natives barbaric and evil, by calling their sort of culture Neolithic. And I have to laugh all the time when white people say that native people were Neolithic and we were just running around like cavemen and we weren't technologically advanced, when there were so many things that we strived in. There were so many things that we accomplished without settlers. Alright, so that in itself was such a cringy video. Oh my gosh. Videos like this show like how the alt-right never gives citations and they never give any credible sources, yet they get millions of views and they get thousands of likes. I mean, this video was full of strawmans and illogical fallacies and historical inaccuracies, and it got so much positive feedback. If you look into the comment sections too, you see some pretty disgusting and gross stuff. Videos like these are extremely dangerous because they give no sources, they give no evidence for their racist views, yet this stuff is fed into society's mouth, and it makes us think about these things, and it makes us look at native people, and it makes us like these prejudice attitudes that we have towards that non-natives have to native people. It makes them carry out these actions, and it makes them look at indigenous people different. Native men are being killed. Two-spirit natives are being killed. LGBTQ natives are being killed. Native kids are being killed. Native women are being killed and they're going missing and they're getting murdered. When videos like this are made and they're released, we become so desensitized to what's going on to native communities, to native women, to native kids, to the LGBT native community. We become so desensitized to this racist propaganda. Whenever you watch videos like this, please do your own research. Look up your own facts. Even if they do give research and they do give credible sources, please still look up for yourself. Even on this video, go look up all the stuff that I said. Go look it up for yourself. I'll be trying to put down either all the sources that I got, either in a Word document, or I'll try to put it all in the bio. So besides that, man, it's Pancho. You already know.
You ain't know me, baby, yeah, they call me Javi. I be posted in the cut with the Tommy. Next year, I'll be riding in the Audi. I be smoking up the zip like a Molly. I got all these niggas mad cause they see me in a whip. I be wasting too much time out here messing with your bitch. She want love and emotion, baby girl, just take this dick. I can never put my love on my